Welcome to the deep dive. You see all those dense articles, research papers piling up, or maybe just headlines that hint at something huge happening, but they never quite break it down. Well, our job here is basically to cut through all that, find the really crucial nuggets of knowledge and hand them straight to you. It's kind of a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. And today we're unpacking something, well, pretty seismic, really. What many are calling Asia's new Cold War. We're talking about this rapidly solidifying U.S.-India alliance, how it's emerging as a strategic counterweight to China. And look, this isn't just some regional issue. It's a dynamic with truly profound global implications. Stuff that shapes everything from, trade routes to the future of tech. And honestly, it often gets massively oversimplified in the mainstream media. So we're going to pull back the curtain a bit on this.
Indeed. And in this exploration, we really want to move beyond just the surface level stuff. We'll unpack the core geopolitics, what's actually driving this major realignment. We'll examine the escalating military moves and, the very real arms race that's accelerating across the Indo-Pacific. We'll also dissect the competing economic strategies, this whole battle for global supply chains and influence, and ultimately analyze the tangible on-the-ground impact this has, what it means for Asia's future and potentially the entire world. What's really fascinating here, I think, is just how multi-layered this rivalry is. It's not just states. It's a contest for the systems themselves. Global influence, control, it runs deep.
Right. And the goal here is that you'll gain insights into facts, into strategies that, frankly, go beyond the headlines, helping you understand the why and the how behind these massive global shifts. This isn't just theory, right? It's about connecting the dots. What's actually happening on the ground, what's being built, what deals are being signed, and how it absolutely affects you, whether that's, the price of goods you buy or maybe the stability of certain geopolitical flashpoints. Okay, so let's unpack this. How did we actually get here? I mean, the U.S. and India, that relationship was once marked by, distance, even some mutual suspicion, wasn't it? How did it suddenly become this strategic linchpin in a whole new geopolitical order? What's driving this convergence of interests right now?
It's been a dramatic pivot, truly. And the motivations on both sides are deeply pragmatic, almost, you could say, ruthlessly so. From the U.S. perspective, there's this crystal clear strategic imperative that's really coalesced over, say, the past decade or so. They perceive India as the only Asian power with the necessary
scale, meaning population, economy, military potential.
Exactly, all of it. The scale to credibly balance Beijing's rapidly expanding influence. And when we say scale, we're talking 1.4 billion people, a burgeoning economy projected to be the world's third largest by 2030, and a military that's already one of the largest globally, and it's constantly modernizing. So this isn't just some fleeting alliance. It's a deliberate, long-term strategic calculation by Washington. They want a multipolar Asia, not one dominated by a single power.
Multipolar. Okay, so not just swapping one hegemon for another.
Precisely. And the crucial insight here isn't just that it's a new Cold War in name. It's that the battleground has fundamentally shifted. It's not just ideology like the old Cold War. It's becoming a systemic competition for things like digital sovereignty, control over the architecture of global commerce. Suddenly, every single tech decision becomes a geopolitical move.
Wow. Okay, so that's the U.S. calculus. What about India? Are they just going along for the ride?
Oh, far from it. India, for its part, isn't simply a passive recipient of American attention. Not at all. New Delhi is actively leveraging this relationship. It desperately seeks American cutting-edge technology. Think everything from advanced AI, next-gen semiconductors, the really high-end stuff, plus significant investment to fuel its own economic engine and crucial military support to modernize its forces.
So it's not charity on either side?
Absolutely not. It's about boosting India's own rise as a global power. New Delhi is keenly aware that its own regional ambitions, particularly, say, in the Indian Ocean, and its goal of becoming a major player on the world stage, these are greatly enhanced by access to advanced U.S. defense systems, dual-use tech, and, of course, the huge financial capital needed to grow its infrastructure and manufacturing base.
So they see it as a way to secure their own position.
Exactly. Secure their regional position, diversify their partnerships, especially away from that historical over-reliance on Russia for defense kit. And crucially, to counter what they also perceive as a direct and growing challenge from China, especially along that hotly disputed Himalayan border.
That's fascinating. So India is not just accepting U.S. attention, but actively using this relationship for its own goals. Does that dynamic make the alliance, more complicated or maybe stronger?
I'd argue it makes it stronger, actually. Traditional alliances, especially Cold War ones, often had a clear sort of patron-client dynamic. Here, both sides are operating from a position of, well, hard-nosed, pragmatic self-interest. And that makes the bond more robust, I think, because it's genuinely mutually beneficial. It's less about just ideological alignment. Both nations recognize the strategic necessity of the other.
Okay, so that makes sense. And this term, New Cold War, you're saying it's more than just a catchy phrase.
Definitely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, yeah, it signifies a very specific and profound shift. It's not just about armies or traditional battle lines, like in the 20th century. While the military stuff is definitely there, and we'll get into that, this is a multifaceted systemic contest for influence. It's about who controls vital trade routes, who achieves technological supremacy in critical areas, AI, quantum semis, and ultimately who gets to set the rules and norms for Asia's future, both economic and security architecture. It's a competition where both sides are making these incredibly calculated moves, like a grand geopolitical chess game, really. Each side anticipating the opponent's moves, planning several steps ahead. It's a battle of systems, values, strategic vision for the 21st century.
It certainly paints a picture of calculated moves. But you mentioned a multipolar Asia as the U.S. goal. Isn't there a risk, though, that by empowering India so much, the U.S. might simply be swapping one potential dominant power for another down the line, even if it's, a friendlier one?
That's a valid concern, and it's definitely part of the long-term strategic thinking in Washington, no doubt. However, the immediate goal, as they see it, isn't just to replace China with India as the sole dominant force. It really is to ensure no single power dominates Asia. A truly multipolar Asia, from the U.S. perspective, means a balance where different nations, Japan, Australia, South Korea, the ASEAN countries, can all exert influence, preventing any one country from dictating terms.
So empowering India is just the most effective way to achieve that balance against China right now.
That seems to be the calculation, yes. The most effective, immediate way. And the expectation, or maybe the hope, is that India, being a democracy with its own complex interests, would be a more amenable partner in upholding a sort of rules-based international order, rather than seeking to unilaterally rewrite it like some fear China wants to do.
Okay, that chess game analogy really helps visualize the whole strategic setup. So with that understanding of the calculus, let's dive into the more tangible stuff, the actual military dynamics playing out.
Right, so with this high-stakes game underway, what's actually happening on the military front? You mentioned an arms race. What kind of hardware is moving? Where are these forces training together? Is it really a visible arms race, or is it more subtle?
Well, it's becoming strikingly visible, I'd say, increasingly so. On the U.S.-India side, we're seeing this unprecedented uptick in the frequency and just the sheer scale of joint military exercises. And these aren't just, symbolic photo ops. They're meticulously designed to build deep interoperability.
Interoperability meaning their forces can actually fight together seamlessly.
Exactly. Communicate securely, coordinate complex maneuvers like anti-submarine warfare or joint air defense, almost as if they were a single command. That significantly amplifies their collective deterrent effect. Look at the Malabar exercises, for instance. Now includes Japan and Australia, too, part of the Quad.
Right, the Quad, that strategic forum, yeah. Those exercises have grown massively in complexity and scope. It's a clear signal of growing alignment in the Indo-Pacific. They practice everything from simulated maritime blockades to complex air combat scenarios, preparing for multi-domain conflicts.
And beyond exercises, actual hardware.
Oh, yeah. The U.S. has rapidly become a key supplier of advanced weaponry to India. That's a huge shift from India's traditional reliance on Russia. We're talking sophisticated platforms like the MQ-9 Reaper drones.
The Reapers, those are serious pieces of kit, not just surveillance, right?
Not just surveillance. They offer India the ability to track border movements with incredible accuracy, yes, but also conduct precision strikes without putting pilots at risk. That's a critical capability, especially for managing a contested high-altitude frontier like the Himalayas. India is also getting state-of-the-art fighter jets, sophisticated surveillance tech.
Yeah.
It significantly enhances their capabilities, both defensive and offensive. Helps narrow that technological gap with China's military, which is also modernizing incredibly fast. This transfer of high-end military tech, stuff previously reserved for the closest treaty allies, is really a cornerstone of the U.S. strategy, empowering India as that counterweight.
Okay, so the U.S. and India are clearly deepening military ties. How is China responding to all this? They can't just be watching, surely.
No, absolutely not. China's responding, and aggressively, showing a very clear intent to project power and secure its own interests. A major countermeasure is their continued and rapid fortification and militarization of those bases in the South China Sea.
The artificial islands, you mean?
Exactly. Those artificial islands, reefs. They're being equipped with runways for large military aircraft, missile batteries that can target ships and planes hundreds of miles away, advanced radar. It's all aimed at strengthening China's territorial claims and projecting power across those vital shipping lanes. Trillions of dollars in trade go through there.
Yeah.
It creates this undeniable permanent military footprint across a huge, strategically crucial maritime area.
And their Navy, I hear a lot about that.
Concurrently, yes, China is undertaking this aggressive ramp-up in the size and modernization of its Navy. The plan, the People's Liberation Army Navy, it's not just a coastal defense force anymore. It's becoming a true blue water Navy, capable of projecting power far beyond its immediate shores. This means building new aircraft carriers, stealth destroyers, advanced submarines, all designed to challenge naval dominance across the Indo-Pacific and even further.
Wow. And what about alliances on their side?
Critically, China is strengthening its long-standing military and strategic ties with Pakistan. That alliance gives Beijing a strategic counterbalance to India on its western flank. It effectively ties up Indian military resources and attention along that border, limiting India's ability to fully focus eastward towards China. It's like a classic pincer move, strategically constraining India.
So this brings up that arms race question again. What does a 21st century arms race even look like? It's not just counting tanks anymore, is it?
No, not at all. Though numbers still matter, of course. But it's intensely focused on the technological edge. Who has the best stealth capabilities for planes and ships?
Yeah.
Who dominates in cyber warfare, disrupting critical infrastructure? Who has superior space capabilities for surveillance, communication, navigation? It also extends to strategic positioning, secure logistics, advanced intelligence gathering, forward operating bases. And in this highly connected, tech-heavy environment, the risk of miscalculation or accidental escalation becomes very, very real. Well, imagine a minor incident, a contested border, disputed waters, maybe a patrol boat bumps another, or a drone flies too close. With heightened tensions and advanced interlinked command systems, something small could quickly spiral out of control, leading to unintended consequences. That's the real worry.
Right, the risk of accidental conflict.
Okay, so beyond the hardware and the training, you mentioned the economic battlefield is equally crucial, maybe even more so.
I'd argue potentially more so in the long run, yeah.
Because that's where the deep structural advantage might truly be won or lost. It shapes the very fabric of global commerce for decades.
It really feels like the economic sphere is where some of the deepest, most fundamental changes are happening right now. How does the economy factor into this competition? Is it just a zero-sum game? Winners and losers as supply chains shift and investment flows?
The economy is absolutely central. Arguably, the primary battleground for the long haul, because it dictates global influence, resilience, everything. The U.S. is pursuing this very deliberate economic strategy. Not necessarily full decoupling from China, but definitely de-risking, diversification.
De-risking,
Yeah.
okay. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, a key insight into the U.S. strategy isn't total decoupling. It's more about building what you might call redundant trust networks. It's about creating a parallel, resilient global supply chain and innovation ecosystem, with India as a potential major linchpin, effectively giving the world a genuine choice beyond China for critical goods. That's a strategic lever that takes decades to build, by the way. So in practice, it means actively encouraging, even facilitating, the relocation of manufacturing and critical supply chains out of China and into India.
And that's driven by
Both economic resilience, we saw the disruptions from the pandemic, from conflicts, right? But also profound national security concerns. Reducing dependence on a geopolitical rival for essential stuff. The idea is building these redundant, trusted supply chains that are less vulnerable to geopolitical leverage.
And we're seeing investment follow that strategy.
Oh, absolutely. Billions of dollars in American investment are flowing into India, truly unprecedented scale. This aims to bolster India's manufacturing capabilities, develop its infrastructure, think state-of-the-art ports, roads, digital networks, and rapidly accelerate its tech sectors. The goal is making India a genuinely viable, large-scale alternative to China for global production for innovation.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Major tech companies, especially in electronics, smartphone manufacturing, they've already announced massive multi-billion-dollar commitments, establishing or expanding production in India, aiming to shift significant chunks of their global output there. Think entire sectors, especially high-value ones like semiconductors, where, one tiny advanced chip dictates the future of AI and defense, or pharmaceuticals, where a secure supply chain means national health security. These aren't small tweaks. They're foundational shifts in global economic geography.
Right, and China's response, they clearly won't just stand by while the U.S. and India try to reroute global commerce.
No, definitely not. China's primary economic counter, and arguably one of its most ambitious strategic initiatives ever, is the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. This is that massive infrastructure and investment project spanning Asia, Africa, parts of Europe.
Yeah, ports, railways, pipelines. It's huge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
High-speed rail, new ports, energy pipelines, digital infrastructure, you name it. The aim of BRI is clearly to bind trade partners closer and forge deep economic dependencies. By financing and building critical infrastructure, often in developing nations, China ensures its continued access to markets' resources and extends its geopolitical influence far and wide. It's a way of embedding itself deeply into the global economic fabric, making it incredibly difficult for countries to just choose sides without facing significant economic pain.
Can you give an example of that embedding?
Well, look at projects like the Gwadar port in Pakistan or the railway lines connecting Kunming in China down through Laos and beyond in Southeast Asia. These are physical manifestations of the strategy, creating permanent corridors of Chinese influence and trade that are incredibly hard to unwind later.
So when we assess who's winning this economic contest, is it clear yet?
It's really nuanced, and certainly not zero-sum in the short term. While India's economy is growing rapidly, it's one of the fastest-growing major economies, China still holds that title, the world's factory. It remains an overwhelmingly dominant global economic force just by sheer scale. Its integration into existing supply chains, its huge consumer market. The U.S. objective isn't necessarily to completely dismantle China's economic power overnight. That's probably impossible. It's more about tipping the balance economically, reducing its own reliance, strengthening alternatives.
How do they tip the balance?
By incentivizing companies' tax breaks, subsidies to move operations out of China, providing diplomatic backing for Indian market reforms, actively promoting India as a stable, reliable place for foreign direct investment. It's about creating options, fostering a more diversified global economic landscape, one that's less beholden to a single, potentially adversarial power. But look, this is a marathon, not a sprint. The outcome depends on decades of strategic investment, policy choices, and frankly, India's ability to absorb all this and scale up effectively.
Okay, these economic and military moves, they're the visible tip of the iceberg, as you said. But like in any big geopolitical chess match, the really impactful moves often happen quietly, right? Away from the spotlight. Intelligence sharing, secret deals. What are these hidden hands doing? How are they shaping the future?
Yeah, you've hit on a crucial point there. A significant and often deliberately underreported aspect of this whole dynamic involves deep strategic cooperation, stuff that goes way beyond the public announcements. This includes extensive intelligence sharing between the U.S. and India, and that's absolutely vital for understanding emerging threats, anticipating geopolitical shifts.
What kind of shifts? Like terrorist movements or?
Yeah, terrorist movements, regional destabilization efforts, maybe tracking naval movements, coordinating effective counter-responses. Both countries benefit hugely from getting a more complete and nuanced picture of the global security environment. Allows them to be proactive, not just reactive. And this exchange often involves highly sensitive data, satellite imagery, signals intelligence, maybe even human intelligence, stuff that rarely, if ever, becomes public.
And beyond spy stuff.
Well, there are increasingly important cyber defense pacts. This is huge now. Given the escalating importance of cyber warfare, the constant threat of sophisticated state-sponsored attacks against critical infrastructure, financial systems, defense networks, agreements on cyber defense are critical, protecting national infrastructure, sensitive data, classified info. This collaboration helps build resilience against those digital threats. They share best practices, threat intel, maybe even develop joint response capabilities.
And space. You hear talk about space cooperation.
Definitely. There's growing space cooperation. And this often has dual-use implications, meaning technology developed for peaceful, civilian purposes like climate monitoring satellites or GPS systems can also be applied for military intelligence, advanced surveillance, reconnaissance, or even potentially for developing anti-satellite capabilities down the line. This shared access to space-based capabilities gives a significant strategic advantage: situational awareness, communication.
Okay, so lots happening behind the scenes. Then there's the Quad. That seems more public, but still kind of low-key compared to NATO or something.
Right. The Quad Alliance is a critical, though often deliberately low-profile, pillar of this strategy. U.S., India, Japan, Australia. It's quietly building this sort of security net around China. It functions mainly as a diplomatic and security dialogue. Leaders, officials coordinate responses to regional challenges, discuss maritime security, promote democratic values, and they advocate for that free and open Indo-Pacific, which is, let's be honest, a direct counterpoint to China's increasing assertiveness and its territorial claims in the region.
So its existence itself is a message.
Exactly. Its very existence serves as a multilateral counterbalance, shows a united front among key Indo-Pacific powers, signals a collective commitment to a rules-based order. It's a form of strategic encirclement, really, aimed at deterring unilateral actions by Beijing. While it's not a formal military alliance like NATO with mutual defense clauses, its rapid evolution and the increasing frequency of joint exercises involving Quad members sends a very clear message.
It sounds like a pretty clear alignment among those four. But what about Russia? This is where it gets complicated, right? Historically, India and Russia have had incredibly strong ties, especially in defense. Where does Russia fit in this new picture? Are they picking a side or trying to play both?
Russia occupies this truly ambiguous, complex position, essentially playing both sides for its own strategic benefit, maximizing its leverage. On one hand, Russia continues to sell significant amounts of advanced weapons to India, maintaining that long-standing, absolutely crucial defense relationship dating back decades. India's military still relies heavily on Russian kit, fighter jets like the Su-30s, S-400 air defense systems. Maintaining that supply chain is vital for India's immediate defense needs, especially vis-a-vis Pakistan and China. New Delhi simply can't switch its entire arsenal overnight, even if it wants to diversify eventually.
So India needs Russia, militarily speaking, for now.
For now, yes. But simultaneously, Russia is undeniably strengthening its strategic partnership with China. They often align with Beijing against perceived Western influence. We see joint military exercises, massive energy deals, coordinated diplomatic positions on global issues, presenting a unified front against what they both often call Western hegemony. This complex stance just highlights the shifting, opportunistic nature of global alliances today.
So Moscow leverages both relationships.
Pretty much. Leverages its ties with both India and China to maximize its own geopolitical standing and economic interests, rather than committing exclusively to one bloc. It creates this fascinating triangular dynamic. India maintains a vital defense link with Russia. Even as Russia draws closer to China, the country India sees as its main strategic challenge. That the very delicate balance speaks volumes about the multipolar ambitions of many nations now, where alliances are often transactional, fluid, not rigidly ideological.
It certainly adds another layer of complexity. Wow. Okay, so with all these pressures mounting the U.S.-India alliance, the Quad, the economic shifts, even Russia's weird position, how is Beijing actually reacting? Are they feeling the heat, or are they confident?
China is absolutely employing a sophisticated, dual-pronged strategy. It's that mix of assertiveness and conciliation, the classic carrot and stick approach, but on a massive geopolitical scale. On the aggressive side, the stick, Beijing is actively warning its neighbors, particularly smaller nations in Southeast Asia, don't choose sides in this new Cold War.
Is that an explicit warning?
Sometimes explicit, sometimes more implied. But it often carries potential economic or diplomatic repercussions for countries that align too closely with the U.S.-India bloc. It's a way of exerting immense pressure, testing the resolve of nations in its backyard, constantly reminding them of China's huge economic power and geographic proximity. They are desperate to prevent a solid regional front from truly forming against them. This pressure might look like trade restrictions, maybe reduced tourism, even diplomatic snubs.
Okay, so that's the stick. What's the carrot?
Simultaneously, China is offering the carrot. Large-scale trade deals, massive investment opportunities across Asia, Africa, beyond. This is part of that broader diplomatic and economic offensive, aiming to solidify economic dependencies, keep these nations firmly within its sphere of influence. Think of it as an alternative attraction. Align with us, there's immense, tangible economic benefit, never mind what the U.S. and India are doing. This strategy leverages China's vast financial resources, its position as the world's largest trading nation, to secure loyalty and prevent isolation. It's a very powerful tool. Ensure continued access to resources, markets globally, bind nations to its economic orbit, often through projects involving significant debt, which creates long-term leverage.
It sounds incredibly calculated, but do these smaller countries truly feel they have a choice? Or is Beijing's economic leverage just so immense that not choosing sides often means still sort of bending to China's will anyway?
That's precisely the crux of the dilemma for many of these nations. On paper, sure, they have a choice. But in practice, it often feels like a Hobson's choice. China's economic pull is undeniable. For many developing nations, the immediate benefits of, say, a BRI infrastructure project or a preferential trade deal are just too substantial to ignore. Diversifying away from China means finding alternative markets, financing, supply chains. That's a slow, complex, often very costly process. So while they might appreciate the U.S. offering an alternative, the hard economic reality often forces them to tread very, very carefully with Beijing. It's a constant tightrope walk for them.
Right. Okay, so given all this tension, the heated rhetoric, the strategic maneuvering, are we seeing any direct signs of actual conflict, or is it still mostly a strategic standoff? What about these flashpoints you mentioned?
Well, a direct, large-scale military conflict, a full-blown war, is not yet apparent. And, as we discussed, both sides are acutely aware of the immense catastrophic costs such a war would entail. The global economic fallout, the human toll, the potential for wider escalation, maybe even nuclear, that acts as a very strong deterrent for all the major powers involved. Nobody wants to actively cross that threshold.
Okay, so no big war
yet. But that definitely doesn't mean there are no flashpoints or that the situation is stable. Far from it.
Yeah.
The frequency of border skirmishes between India and China, particularly along that disputed Himalayan frontier in areas like Ladakh, that's notably increasing. And these aren't minor incidents. We're talking physical clashes, sometimes brutal ones. Standoffs involving thousands of troops at extreme altitude, deployment of significant military resources to really inhospitable terrain. This highlights tangible flashpoints and the very real risk of escalation even as it starts localized.
So these skirmishes show the friction is real.
Absolutely. They demonstrate that while a full-scale war is being avoided, these friction points are very much alive, and they carry the potential to spiral if they aren't managed extremely carefully. It's a constant test of resolve on both sides and a stark reminder of the underlying territorial disputes that fuel part of this wider rivalry.
Okay, so what does all this mean? These high-stakes geopolitical games, the economic battles.
Yeah.
What does it mean for ordinary people living in Asia? And what are the broader global implications we should be watching for? It can't just be about governments and armies, right?
No, absolutely not. For Asian citizens, the ripple effects are quite profound. And they can be contradictory, actually, creating both opportunities and significant challenges. On one hand, that U.S. strategy of shifting supply chains, the increased American and Western investment flowing into India, that could very well lead to a boom. More jobs, significant economic growth for ordinary people in India, new factories, electronics assembly, for instance, improved infrastructure like logistics hubs, a burgeoning tech sector. That means potentially unprecedented employment opportunities, rising incomes, maybe rapidly improving living standards for millions. That's a direct, tangible benefit of becoming a favored alternative manufacturing hub. It fuels aspirational growth.
But there's a downside, too.
Oh, yeah. There's also the very real risk of higher prices for everyone. If trade wars escalate, if supply chains become fragmented, meaning companies have to duplicate infrastructure or source components from multiple, maybe less efficient locations, and if tariffs get slapped on goods, well, the cost of goods and services could significantly increase, impacting everyday consumers across the region and, frankly, globally.
Can you give an example of that fragmentation impact?
Sure. Imagine you're a small business owner, say in Hanoi, Vietnam. Right now, one day your raw materials come cheaply, easily from China. The next day, maybe a Western partner is pressuring you gently or not so gently to diversify your supply chain. Source from India or maybe locally in Vietnam. That could potentially double your shipping costs or require entirely new certifications for compliance. That's not just some abstract geopolitical headline. It's a direct, stressful impact on your family's income, the viability of your business.
And what about those countries caught in the middle, like Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia?
They're in a really unenviable position. They're being pressured constantly. As you said, everyone wants their loyalty. It forces them into these incredibly difficult diplomatic and economic choices, that their future economic prosperity might very well depend on how skillfully they navigate these competing demands, trying to maintain neutrality or balance relationships without alienating either major power. It's incredibly tough.
And looking globally, what are the bigger repercussions?
Globally, this whole dynamic could lead to a fundamental shift in the global economy. Really fundamental. We could see new centers of economic power emerge, maybe dramatically revise trade routes as nations prioritize resilience and these trusted partnerships over just pure cost efficiency. If Asia really does split into rival camps or even just deeply differentiated blocks, that will directly affect global supply chains for pretty much everything, from the microchips in your phone to the clothes you wear, potentially making everything harder or more expensive to get.
And technology,
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah, it'll impact access to critical technology, intellectual property, advanced manufacturing capabilities. They'll become increasingly guarded, maybe even weaponized in the competition, subject to export controls, maybe outright bans. And it could even affect global oil prices due to shifts in production transport routes, especially through contested maritime areas and just demand dynamics within these new economic blocks as energy security becomes absolutely paramount for nations. It's a huge tectonic shift, moving away from that single interconnected global factory model towards one of potentially two, maybe more competing ecosystems.
Wow. Okay. We know you, our listener, always have insightful questions. And after hearing all this, some big ones probably come to mind. So let's tackle a couple that are directly relevant to this deep dive, especially around the risks and opportunities in this whole situation. Right? Our deep dives always spark important questions. We want to address a couple that are likely on your mind after hearing about these really intense geopolitical shifts. Let's start with the biggest one. The question that hangs over any Cold War discussion. Could this new Cold War turn into a real hot war?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? And it's something policymakers grapple with constantly. The likelihood assessment, for now, is that a full-scale direct conflict is possible, but unlikely. Both sides, the U.S. and China, and their allies, they are acutely aware, as we said, that the cost would be immense, mutually destructive on an unimaginable scale. The global economic collapse, the catastrophic human toll, the potential for nuclear escalation. It acts as a very strong deterrent. Nobody wants to actively cross that line.
All right, so direct conflict, unlikely for now. But you mentioned other risks.
Right. The real danger, I think, lies in proxy conflicts. These are situations where the major powers support opposing sides in a more localized conflict, but without directly fighting each other. Maybe through arms sales, intelligence sharing, financial aid, those flashpoints we talked about, the South China Sea with disputed islands, constant naval interactions, or the India-China border where clashes have already happened. Those are prime candidates.
Yeah.
A single miscalculation by a local commander, a collision between ships, maybe a ripple effect from a small incident that could quickly broaden the conflict, draw in external support, turn a localized dispute into a wider proxy battle that's incredibly hard to de-escalate. Those are the sparks we really need to watch for.
That makes sense. The localized flashpoints are the tinderbox. Okay, now for listeners maybe thinking about the markets or just their financial future, another common question. What should investors watch for in this new geopolitical landscape?
Yeah, for investors, this new Cold War is creating both significant risks and some distinct opportunities. It's fundamentally reshaping investment landscapes. You should closely watch for shifts in specific sectors: tech, energy, and defense stocks. These are particularly sensitive to geopolitical realignments, supply chain disruptions, and obviously increased military spending. For example, tech companies involved in semiconductors, AI, advanced computing, they might face more scrutiny. Export controls, they might be forced to choose sides on where they manufacture. That could create huge winners and losers within the sector.
And defense and energy.
Defense companies naturally would likely see increased government spending, more demand for advanced weaponry. That's fairly straightforward. Energy markets could become much more volatile due to shifts in alliances, potential disruptions to traditional supply routes, especially through those contested seas, or just new national energy security priorities that favor domestic or allied sources over others.
Okay, those are the sectors to watch. Are there opportunities beyond specific stocks, maybe geographically?
Potentially, yes. Countries that manage to stay neutral, or at least very deftly balance their relationships, think maybe Vietnam, for example, could benefit the most. These nations are strategically positioned to attract investment from both blocs. They could become attractive alternative manufacturing hubs for companies looking to diversify away from China, but maybe without fully committing to just one side. By maintaining diverse trade relationships, not alienating Washington or Beijing, they can position themselves as relative economic safe havens, drawing capital, business from both sides. This creates unique investment opportunities in their own growing manufacturing, infrastructure, tech sectors. and maybe in critical raw materials they possess that are in high demand from everyone.
Right. The neutral ground potentially becomes valuable ground. Okay, this is clearly a super dynamic situation. So many moving parts, such high stakes. Let's try to look ahead then. With all these pieces on the board, what are the next few moves we might anticipate in this evolving grand strategy? Where do the U.S. and India go next? How will China likely respond?
For the U.S. and India, the path forward seems pretty clear and deeply entrenched now. They will continue to tighten their alliance relentlessly. This means pursuing more comprehensive strategic deals, going far beyond just military cooperation. We can anticipate deeper economic integration, more investment, maybe ambitious trade agreements aimed at really creating that parallel supply chain, and advanced technological partnerships. In critical emerging fields, AI, quantum, biotech, advanced materials, the goal is to make their relationship indispensable to each other's strategic and economic goals, weaving their destinies closer together as this formidable counterbalance to China.
What would that look like practically? Joint development?
Yeah, possibly joint development projects, more robust intelligence sharing architectures, coordinated diplomatic efforts on a global scale, trying to influence international norms, maybe even joint operations in things like humanitarian aid or disaster relief, just to demonstrate that interoperability and shared values publicly.
Okay, so further tightening from U.S.-India. What about China's counter strategy?
China's counter will be equally determined, equally multifaceted. Reflecting Beijing's profound commitment to its own regional and global ambitions, it will almost certainly intensify efforts to break up the Quad alliance. They see that as a key part of this perceived encirclement. This will likely involve a mix of tactics. Diplomatic pressure, offering compelling economic incentives to individual Quad members, especially maybe Japan and Australia, trying to soften their stance, and leveraging propaganda to sow discord among the allies, highlighting potential costs or risks of aligning too closely with the U.S.
Trying to peel them off, basically.
Exactly. And simultaneously, China will continue striving to win over smaller Asian countries, keeping them firmly within China's orbit. That means continued massive investment through the Belt and Road Initiative, attractive trade deals promising immediate economic benefits, asserting its influence through various regional forums, bilateral agreements. They aim to prevent a unified, cohesive front from truly solidifying against them. Create strategic fissures, exploit differences where they can.
So the long-term outlook, is this going to end anytime soon?
I really don't think so. The long-term outlook is that this chess game is just beginning. This isn't some short-term skirmish or a temporary phase that's going to resolve itself quickly. We're likely looking at a protracted period of strategic competition across multiple domains: military, economic, technological, diplomatic. It will likely define the next few decades of international relations. The balance of power in Asia, and by extension the world, will be fundamentally shaped by the success or failure of these long-term strategies on all sides. It'll require constant adaptation, calculated risks, immense diplomatic skill. You know, this entire deep dive, we've tried to peel back layers you might not normally see in the daily headlines. Revealed a geopolitical landscape far more complex, more interconnected than it's often portrayed. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Beyond the overt actions, the stuff we can see, what are the truly hidden strategies being woven right now in those quiet halls of power? The agreements made with a handshake, not a press conference. The technological breakthroughs being developed in secret labs. And how will those invisible threads ultimately reshape your world? From the products you buy, the jobs available, to the stability of global markets, regional peace. It's just a powerful reminder, I think, that the most significant stories often unfold in the shadows, requiring us to look deeper, always look deeper than what's immediately visible.
Absolutely. Well, this deep dive aimed to cut through some of that noise, give you a clearer, hopefully more nuanced picture of this strategic competition shaping Asia's future. We really hope you feel more informed, more equipped to understand these incredibly complex dynamics playing out on the global stage.
Yeah, and remember, understanding the real story means looking beyond the surface, connecting those seemingly disparate dots, because the implications of this new geopolitical landscape, they're going to echo for decades, influencing pretty much everything from global trade to peace and security across the globe.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We love bringing you these insights, digging into these complex topics, and we'll see you next time.